so much,
tá?
Dan. If you're just joining us, welcome to Kennedy
Ainda
Space Center and our
não
live
temos novo
coverage
T0.
of Artemis 1, an
Então,
uncrewed flight
pelo
test
menos
that will
até
return us to the
3h40, mas
moon
também
in nearly
3h45 é daqui a
50
pouco.
years. But,
25
some might
minutos.
ask, why
Pensando
the
que era
moon?
3 agora,
Well, here's why.
3h45 é já. Tá? E assim
We
vamos seguindo
are
e acompanhando aqui o que a NASA vai falando.
The history of this agency is marked
Para
with
ver o que vai
broken
dar certo.
barriers, once viewed as
Falta
impossible,
fazer o ping. É verdade.
with science fiction turned
Chama o Elon
reality,
Musk, né? Aí
with
sim, né?
innovations
Chama o Elon Musk com a
that have
Starlink
spun
dele.
industries all their own, and with demonstrations of peace
3h40.
for all
O cara lá
humankind.
tinha falado 4 e sei lá
We
quando.
soar in the skies of our home planet.
Já pensou se lança 4h20?
We
Aí a galera vai
maintain
ficar
a
maluca,
human
né?
presence just outside of gravity, and we touch
Aí a
points
galera
all
vai ficar
across the
doida.
solar system and beyond.
Não, ele tinha falado 4h32, eu acho, tá?
And this is why.
The moon is a treasure trove
Chama o
of
Elon
science.
Musk pra colocar a Starlink lá pra galera.
To make discoveries about our home planet, about our sun,
And about our solar system.
The wealth of knowledge to be
É,
gleaned from
precisa
the
de uma
moon
guerra fria,
will
né, pra
inspire a new
agilizar as
generation of
coisas.
thought and action.
Without fail, every major program and mission NASA has invested in has led to technologies and capabilities that
Então
have shaped our
estamos
culture.
aí no aguardo,
breakthroughs of the
antes de
Artemis
3h45
era
não vai,
will
também
define our
3h45.
and the generations
Daqui
to
a
follow.
pouco,
The
sei
tens
lá,
of
tô achando que esse
thousands of
negócio vai ficar lá
jobs
para umas
associated with
4h30
propelling
mesmo,
us to
hein?
the moon today are just the beginning of a lunar economy that will see hundreds of thousands of new jobs develop around the world.
This is not an ambition of one entity or one country. The exploration of the moon is a shared effort.
Woven together by a desire for the greater good.
Why the moon? Because the missions of tomorrow will be sparked by the accomplishments of the Artemis generation today.
because the ambition to go has already begun.
And because Mars is calling. We need to learn what it takes to establish a community on another cosmic shore. So let's camp close before pushing out.
And so, we go to the moon now, not as a series of isolated missions, but to build a community on and around the moon capable of proving how to live on other worlds.
We'll use the lessons from more than 50 years of peaceful exploration to send a new generation to the lunar surface to stay.
We will anchor our efforts on the lunar South Pole to establish the Artemis Base Camp,
positioning us for long-term science and exploration of the lunar surface.
We will prove what it takes to assemble a complex ship in deep space.
We will perfect descending down to and returning from a distant surface.
We will learn how humans can survive and thrive in a partial gravity environment.
With improved spacesuit designs, mobile habitats, and with reconnaissance robots pre-positioning and relocating supplies.
We will learn how to utilize the resources we find on these other worlds, starting with finding water ice and purifying it to drinkable water.
And refining that into hydrogen for fuel and oxygen to breathe.
We will establish fission power plants on the surface of the moon, capable of supporting a growing community of efforts.
And we will expand the logistics supply chain
to enable commercial and international partners
to resupply and refuel deep space outposts.
None of this is simple or easy, but nothing in our history ever has been.
The Eagle has landed. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
This kind of continuous lunar presence is a natural extension of all that we've learned in low Earth orbit. And what we will accomplish there will ensure the monumental missions to Mars are within reach. As we ready the launch of the first Artemis mission, and as commercial companies ready their lunar landers for the first private payload deliveries, we have already begun to take the next step.
Throughout this launch broadcast, our NASA's Leah Martin Ryan has been introducing us to people over at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex who have come out for hopefully the maiden voyage of Artemis 1. People from near and far, young and old, just really excited to hopefully see this historic flight. So now she's joined by somebody else who has a really interesting story. Leah, tell us about it.
Megan, I think one of the most exciting things about being here tonight is being with people who are like-minded, who have such a strong tie to the history of our nation's space program and their love of spaceflight. And I actually struck up an amazing conversation with Scott here, and you were telling me about the special tie that you have to tonight's launch as well.
Oh yeah, I literally grew up with NASA. My father went to work with the NACA before NASA, went to work for Dr. Von Braun, followed him over to Marshall Space Flight Center, and became, when it became NASA, he worked on the Jupiter C, Redstone, Saturn 1, Saturn 5, and then because of that, he brought me here to see Apollo 11 launch. So that was my first launch. I was 5 years old. I loved it. Still remember the sound. That's about all. And then years later, through my flying career, I was able to bring my sons back with my friends that flew the shuttle, and they saw 5 launches and 4 landings. But basically, I wanted to be here. I was here for the first moon launch, the last moon launch back with Uncle Gene Cernan, our family friend, went to on Apollo 17. So I wanted to be here for this because it's kind of in our family, in our blood. And hopefully I'll be around for the next one when we go and land again. So
incredible. So you have NASA actually in your DNA, grew up with the program.
Yeah. I knew most of the German scientists. The kids sat in our lap, Dr. Ernst Sterlinger, and my father flew with Von Braun because he was a general aviation pilot as well. So they get off work and fly, and they were in Life magazine together, National Geographic, so it was fun. I literally got to knew Al Shepard, all the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo guys, and it was an honor. I would have loved to have been an astronaut, but I went a different route. But I can still come here and see them.
We can, and we're so grateful, so thrilled to see you here tonight, and so excited that you will be able to actually compare the last launch and the sound of the last one with the one tonight. It's absolutely going to rock the sky.
I want to be even louder. I want to feel it.
Well, thanks so much for joining us tonight. It's been an honor to meet you, and Megan, we're going back to you.
Leah, thank you so much for sharing that. That was such a fun story. Here we are now at Space Center Houston. This is a live look inside of the visitor center there. Lots of people hoping to see the launch today. I love this guy in the front with his NASA shirt representing. And again, just seeing children and young and old, just all these people who feel captivated and are excited about our next giant leap into deep space. So glad to have them here. Oh my gosh, I love this.
The team in Marshall and Huntsville there is always ready for their shot. Even their flag, they're super pumped. That's the home to the SLS program office, so they have a dog in the fight tonight, seeing Artemis launch for the first time.
Is that an inflatable astronaut in the center? Do you see that? I think somebody is dressed up as an astronaut. Yeah,
they're
representing.
ready to go.
I love this. Yeah, I'm so glad that they're there. Again, these visitor centers are closed to the public, but the people there decided to hold a watch party.
Well, look, our friends in Germany are ready for us this time. They're anticipated the delay. They look pumped and ready to go.
So these are employees of Airbus. Airbus is the main contractor for the European Space Agency, and together they provided the European service module for the Orion spacecraft. So really, we should be applauding them. They shouldn't be applauding. Thank you so much, guys, for your contribution to the program, and can't wait to see Orion and SLS launch. Okay, so now let's head back over to Daryl Nail over with the launch team so we can hear any updates about a new T0.
Yeah, Megan, thank you. And a clearer picture is starting to emerge as the launch team now reports out that they only have a few minutes left of work to do before they're ready to pick up polling. And we're also hearing that some of that polling, which kicks off with the mission management team, is also now just about 3.5 minutes away. Now, we are currently still in that hold. But the launch team, NASA's test director, is continuing to move the team forward. We've wrapped up work on the upper stage and the lower stage. You're looking now live inside Firing Room 1. Where Launch Director Charlie Blackwell Thompson is overseeing her launch team. We've had a number of delays that have put us off the T0, but we are starting to track to a T0 close to around a quarter till, top of the hour. But we do need to have some polling that takes place. I'm pausing now because I'm listening in to the teams as they communicate. In this launch window, which we're currently 26 minutes into, and it's 2 hours long, it runs until 3:04 a.m. Eastern Time. We have what's called 40 cutouts. And in those cutouts, they range from about a second to about a minute. These are times where they can't launch. These cutouts must be accounted for when determining a new T0. The upper stage of the rocket, which was the last to get ready and configured, just recently the team cycled the liquid hydrogen valves, which is required.
Alguém aposta em 4:20, será?
LO2 valves, liquid
não,
oxygen
acho que
valves
não.
in the
Vai ser
upper
mais
stage.
que 4. É 3:30 já.
Almost done.
Você sabe que nem todo mundo sabe o significado do bendito do 4:20, né?
Não sabem? Vocês não sabem o que significa 4:20, galera? Escreve aí quem não sabe.
Só quem é da turma do 4:20.
We are now a minute and a half away from the poll of the mission management team, which is several minutes before T-minus 15 minutes.
Não sei não, galera.
Pode ter certeza.
When that poll starts, we'll get a clearer picture
Soube porque tu me explicou o que que
of
é.
our T0.
Ai, ai. O que é mais fácil? Adivinhar o novo técnico do Corinthians ou o novo T0? É verdade, né? O novo T0.
NASA's test director has informed the launch team to all switch to a common communication channel. It's called 232. And what this means is that the entire launch team is now on one channel, and all future communication will happen there, whereas there are many channels. Now they reduce it down to one. Just heard from NASA test director Carlos Monge. I'm sorry, Jeff Spalding. Jeff Spalding's on. They swapped out. There are currently no constraints to launch. Great news. Again, no constraints to launch. And they're getting ready to pick up with a poll to determine readiness for launch.
Eles estão fazendo algumas chamadas. Ele está falando pausadamente porque ele está ouvindo a comunicação da galera lá. Vamos ver. Nós estamos aí 26 minutos dentro da janela. Estão passando lá por todas as verificações para determinar o novo T0.
Okay, NASA test director Jeff Spalding getting ready to conduct the readiness poll, so we are getting close. We're going to pull up the audio now so that you can listen in.
LPs go. And rock. Rock is go. All right, copy all. And launch director NTD, our launch team is ready to proceed at this time.
I copy all NTD. At this time, I will proceed with my poll. And attention on 232, this is the launch director performing the final poll for launch. Verify no constraints and go for launch. EGS Program Chief Engineer.
EGS Program Chief Engineer verifies that the EGS, SLS, and Arroyo Program Chief Engineers have no constraints and are go for launch.
Copy, Greg. Thank you. EGS Chief Safety Officer.
The EGS CSO verifies the SLS Orion and EGS CSOs have no constraints and are go for launch.
Copy, John. Thank you. Range weather. Weather has no constraints and weather is go for launch. Copy LWO and mission manager.
Tá todo mundo no mesmo canal. Vamos lá.
And mission manager, launch director.
Todas as comunicações vão acontecer. Esse lugar aí chama-se
Launch director, mission manager on 232. The mission management team has been pulled. You have a go to proceed with terminal count and launch of Artemis 1.
I copy all. Thank you. And NTD, launch director.
Go ahead, launch director.
Yes, sir. On behalf of all the men and women across our great nation who have worked to bring this hardware together to make this day possible, and for the Artemis generation, this is for you. At this time, I give you a go to resume count and launch Artemis 1.
Copy, launch director, and thank you. All right, we do have a couple of steps to configure, and then we will be ready to resume the clock. CVSE, NTD. CVSE here. Initiate recording of Orion cameras at this time. In work. R, NTD.
RSR
here. Perform the booster ignition SNA arm rotation enable.
A chamada.
NDT, RSR, booster ignition SNA arm and rotation enable is complete.
Notícia, pô.
And I copy, thank you.
Notícia da madrugada, né? Até agora.
Okay, so there you heard the poll from launch director.
Sem nenhuma restrição para o lançamento.
Early.
Tá? Sem nenhuma restrição para o lançamento.
Getting ready to get that new T0 time.
Estamos aí no aguardo. Tá todo mundo no mesmo canal para se comunicar.
The poll that you heard was the NASA test director's poll. And
all right, and we have verified no cutouts at this time. And all personnel, we are going to resume the clock. GLS, you can resume the clock on your mark.
GLS copies. Countdown clock will resume on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. GLS mainline has been initiated.
Okay.
T-minus 10 minutes and counting.
We are T-minus 10 minutes away from liftoff of Artemis 1. As you can see, the clock is now moving. Let's put that up. T-minus 9 minutes and 47 seconds. The L-minus 15 poll complete.
Show 06:47:44 is the new liftoff time.
Affirm.
Okay.
Vamos lá.
01:47:44. 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time and 44 seconds.
Não tem constrições.
We went straight into terminal count.
Aí, passou.
Liftoff now 9 minutes away.
No constraints também. Vamos lá.
So terminal count. Control has been given over to the GLS, the ground launch sequencer, a computer and software that is doing all of the commanding and monitoring of the space launch system.
Atenção, estamos aqui. A diretora de lançamento, a
We'll hear call-outs from the director, Jeff Spaulding.
Tá fazendo a chamada de todos.
GLS is pre-tensioning the umbilicals at this very moment. You can see them as they run down the rocket. That's NASA test
Tá aí, ó. Go to proceed to terminal count.
T-minus 8 minutes and counting.
Tá aí, ó. Go for launch.
The GLS is performing up to 100 commands per second,
Tá lá. Só vamos fazer mais algumas
including
coisinhas,
configuring ground systems for
relógio novo.
power transfer to the rocket. GLS is turning on cameras, recording video inside and outside the crew module to collect data for engineers.
Go for launch.
Purging the aft skirt booster with high flow nitrogen.
Tá aí.
Clear out any
O pull foi
hydrogen
feito, chama
gas
pull
that may
isso
be
aí, tá,
there.
galera? Pull é essa chamada aí que eles fazem, tá? Vamos lá, estamos prontos para ver o novo T0. Atenção.
You can see the crew access
Novo
arm is
T0.
already
Será
retracted.
que é 4:20?
When there is crew during Artemis 2,
Qual é a aposta de vocês?
it would happen at T-minus
Coloquem
6
aí.
minutes. But out of abundance of caution, they went ahead and retracted the arm
Ó,
well ahead of liftoff. Want to point your attention to the base of the mobile launcher. If something wasn't done to reduce the power from the pressure caused by the rocket's ignition and thunderous sound, it could damage the rocket. So the ignition overpressure and sound suppression system will flood the mobile launcher with water. You'll see that sequence start at T-minus 17 seconds. Now coming up in less than 30 seconds, the ground launch sequencer will start bringing the high energy systems online, starting with core stage pressurization. Fire room 1 is completely silent as they listen for the next call.
GLS is go for core stage tank pressurization.
The core stage tank is now pressurizing to flight levels.
9 minutes away. 3:47 é o
The replenish
lançamento.
valve to the liquid hydrogen tank now closing. The liquid oxygen tank will come a little later. Now we're arming the Orion ascent pyros and transfer to internal power.
Está aí, deu tudo certo. Vocês acompanharam aqui ao vivo.
The launch abort system, or LAS jettison motor, is now armed. On this flight, the abort motor is inactive because there is no crew on board. Up next is the flight termination system, or FTS, which gives the Space Force the ability to destruct the rocket if it goes in the wrong direction. Let's listen in for that.
Umbilicais. O que é umbilical? Umbilical é esse cano aqui, ó. Essa linha aqui, ó.
GLS is go for FTS arm.
The flight termination system is now armed. Coming up at 4 minutes and 40 seconds, a big moment. This is where the RS-25 engines and their bleed go to high flow. It's been a little tricky to dial in.
8 minutos.
GLS is go for LH2 high flow bleed check.
Para o lançamento.
Good word, we've passed that. The cryo team got the LH2 engine bleed pressure loop dialed in. They are now at the right temperature for launch. Countdown continues. T-minus 4 minutes, 15 seconds. Up next, GLS fires up the KPUs. Those are high-speed turbines which provide pressure to hydraulic pumps that steer the RS-25s. Stands for Core Stage Auxiliary Power Unit Start.
GLS is go for core stage APU start.
That now leads to the thrust vector control test at T-minus 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That can proceed now, and we will see the engines gimbal at the bottom of the core stage. At T-minus 3 minutes and 10 seconds, you will hear the go for purge sequence 4. That's a helium purge of the 4 core stage engines downstream of the propellant valve, getting the air and moisture out.
GLS is go for purge sequence 4.
And in just a few seconds, GLS will close the core stage LOX vent, liquid oxygen. The white vapor cloud caused from the super cold gaseous oxygen condensing the water in the atmosphere will disappear. You see it coming out there now. And there it goes, it's closed. LOX vent closed, pressure rising in the core stage LOX tank to flight levels. Coming up in 15 seconds, look for that thrust vector control actuator test. Engines will gimbal. And there they go. The 4 core stage RS-25 engines gimbaling around, testing the ability to steer the rocket into space. They will operate at 109% performance. Each RS-25 throwing down 500,000 pounds of thrust. All 4, 2 million pounds. All together with the boosters, 8.8 million pounds of thrust.
GLS is go for upper stage to internal power.
Now the upper stage has gone to internal power. So power is removed from the rocket's upper stage, the ICPS, and it's been switched to battery power. The same milestone is coming up for the core stage at T-minus 1 minute and 30 seconds.
GLS is go for core stage to internal power.
The rocket's core stage, which houses the 3 flight computers, is now on battery power. So there is no more hold time available because there's no more margin on the batteries. So if we have a hold, we'd have to recycle back to T-minus 10 minutes and recharge those batteries. The count continues. A note now, shortly after liftoff.
1 minute.
Shortly after liftoff, Mission Control Houston will take control of the rocket, and my colleague, Leah Cheshire, will take over commentary. T-minus 50 seconds and counting. Coming up at T-minus 33 seconds, the GLS will hand off control to the ALS. This is the autonomous launch sequencer. On board the rocket, it will take over command and control of the rocket. But the ALS will check, make sure there's no holds coming from the ground up until T-minus 2 seconds.
GLS is go for ALS.
And we are go for ALS. The Space Launch System is now counting down to liftoff of Orion on its maiden voyage to the moon. Launch team can no longer recycle the count. Sound suppressor water now flowing under the ML. And here we go.
10.
Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiated. 7, 6, 5. Core stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
All 4 RS-25 engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour. Hearing good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass through max Q at about 1 minute and 9 seconds into launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket. SLS now traveling 607 miles per hour. You're looking at 8.8 million pounds of maximum thrust. Quiet here in the loops in Mission Control. 4 core stage engines throttling down and passing through max Q. Now 1 minute, 21 seconds into the flight, traveling at 1,420 miles per hour.
core stage engines are back at maximum thrust. The next major milestone will be for the solid rocket boosters to cut off and jettison at about 2 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, so about 30 seconds from now. Again, quiet here in Mission Control Houston as teams continue monitoring the flight of Artemis 1. We're now 16 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, traveling over 2,800 miles per hour. Standing by for solid rocket booster jettison and shortly thereafter.
98 metros de altura. Pronto para subir. Minuto.
Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated these 177-foot boosters. Now the core stage continues to power the flight of Orion, all four RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange. 2 minutes and 36 seconds into the flight. Hearing nominal calls here in Mission Control Houston. We've still got 4 good engines on the core stage. Next up, we'll be looking for the service module fairing to separate. This is 3 15 by 15 foot fairing panels, providing structural support, protecting the service module. Those will separate at about 3 minutes and 11 seconds into flight, and very shortly thereafter will be followed by the launch abort system separation. Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 4,060 miles per hour, 83 miles downrange. We just had confirmation that the service module fairing has separated. And that the launch abort system pyros have fired, separating those from Orion as well. For future crew members,
Partiu, vai que vai o SLS.
We just heard the call for 3 engine press, meaning if SLS were to lose an engine at this point in the mission, we could still achieve a nominal mission. We would just have an extended main engine cutoff time. However, we still have 4 good engines, all at maximum thrust right now, powering the first flight of Artemis at 5,200 miles per hour, 148 miles downrange.
Olha aí que coisa linda. E nós vimos antes, né? Nós vimos ao vivo lá com a câmera.
Teve grito sim, tá? Você não
teve não.
We're 4 minutes and 16 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. So far, we've had a clean ascent. We saw those solid rocket boosters jettison about 2 minutes and 11 seconds after liftoff. Shortly after, we had the service module panels fairings separate, as well as the launch abort system. The launch abort system was inert for this flight, except to perform this separation. Those 4 core stage engines will continue to fire and power the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 6,800 miles per hour, 229 miles downrange. Booster flight controller reports that the engines are looking good.
Separando o booster.
Our core stage main engine cutoff time is about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. We are now 5 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, 7,656 miles per hour. Again, 4 good core stage engines, those 4 RS-25 engines. The last time those core stage engines flew, they were taking space shuttles to orbit, and now with upgraded capabilities, they're launching the future of human spaceflight. 5 minutes, 42 seconds into the mission, we are now traveling 8,800 miles per hour, 345 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center. 2 minutes and 36 seconds into the flight. Again, we are anticipating core stage main engine cutoff at about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. And about 10 seconds later, we'll see core stage separation, at which point Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will be flying free. Now traveling over 10,000 miles per hour, 6 minutes and 15 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1, 427 miles downrange. Quiet here on the loops in Mission Control Houston. Teams continue to monitor this first flight.
Você vê o lançamento da Artemis.
About a minute and a half now until that core stage main engine cutoff time. Our 4 core stage engines continue to fire maximum thrust.
Tremeu aí, Bruno? Tremeu mesmo o chão?
Coming up on 7 minutes since launch today, now traveling over 12,800 miles per hour, 563 miles downrange. Again, still quiet here in Mission Control, Houston.
O Gabe falou que ia tremer mesmo.
As we prepare for main engine cutoff, the 4 RS-25 engines are beginning to throttle down.
Não, galera, ó, não é CGI não, viu, pessoal? É verdade mesmo. É impressionante.
30 seconds now until core stage main engine cutoff. All 4 engines continue to throttle down.
Aqui a NASA já colocou o CGI.
Now 7 minutes 45 seconds into the flight, traveling over 16,000 miles per hour.
E a coluna de fumaça, Sérgio, tá bem fortona.
Continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control, Houston. We're standing by for core stage main engine cutoff.
Tá aí, ó, coisa linda. Deu certo, hein, galera? Deu certo. Daqui a pouco é a separação do
And we have confirmation of core stage main engine cutoff. Orion is now in Earth's orbit. The flight dynamics officer reports that we have a nominal main engine cutoff. And we just heard the call for core stage separation. That means Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage are now flying free from the core stage of the Space Launch System. The next milestone will be solar array deploy approximately 18 minutes after liftoff. But before Orion stretches its wings, let's check back in with our friends at Kennedy Space Center and hear all about what it was like to hear the rocket roar off the launch pad. Megan and Kayla, I've got to hear all about it.
Well, if you're just joining us, welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center, where we just watched Artemis 1 launch, our first step towards our next adventure into deep space. As Leah said, I'm NASA's Megan Cruz, and this is NASA astronaut Kayla Barron. And I'm kind of still giddy and speechless. I don't even know how to explain how I'm feeling right now.
I feel the same way. This is the first launch that I've been able to watch in person. And I've got to say, it was incredible. It took my breath away, and I was tearing up. Just what an amazing accomplishment for this team, this international team, people who have been dedicating their careers to getting this rocket off the ground and taking the first step to getting a crew on that vehicle back to the moon. It was just incredible.
Yeah, this is a moment I think that we're all going to remember where we were when we saw this sort of thing, you know what I mean? And it was great to see, again, when we entered into terminal count, everybody here just started cheering, you know, coming out to get a really good view. And boy, I mean, it lit up the night sky, and it just shook everything around us. Did you feel that? Like in my bones, I felt that.
Oh yeah, the cool thing is just kind of the delay between what you see and what you hear, because of course the sound travels a little bit slower, and it was just amazing. The ground shook. We could hear the thrust pushing that rocket into space. 8.8 million pounds of thrust.
Yes.
It's incredible. It was amazing to see here live in person.
How does it compare? So this is your first launch on the ground. How does it compare to your launch when you're in the capsule soaring towards space?
I mean, equally emotional, I think. We train for everything, and so when we're in that capsule waiting for launch, we're just running our procedures. You could almost, trick us and say that we're in the simulator and it wasn't real. But like in that moment of liftoff, when the thrust builds underneath you, like we saw it today, it's just hard not to be overwhelmed by the emotional experience, the excitement, the joy of that moment. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think we can't say it enough. This team really deserved this moment. They've been working so hard for this moment. When I heard that we got into terminal count, it was, I felt a sense of relief and excitement for them that I think everybody here did. You know, we really wanted them to succeed. We really wanted to see the launch today. And wow, I will never forget this.
Me neither. It was an incredible experience to be here and see that happen.
Yeah. Was there anything that was particularly surprising to you? Again, this is your first launch. You know, what were you expecting?
You know, I think we also had a nighttime launch for our launch, and so I think one thing you underestimate is how much it lights up the night sky. We were able to watch it all the way through that trajectory. We were able to see the boosters separate and everything, so it was just an incredible view. It's amazing how much you get to see of the flight path when it's at night and it's lighting up the sky.
Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed this, but we see the moon here, and the trajectory of the rocket looked like it was flying towards me. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my God, that's so poetic. It's so beautiful. I'm so glad we launched today.
Yeah.
Wow.
Congratulations to the team. It's incredible.
We're going to head over to Daryl, who was at the launch team. Daryl, you got to count us down through that, through liftoff. I mean, how was that being in the launch control center with them?
Well, Megan, it was something else. I got to tell you, you're looking live inside the firing room where Charlie Blackwell-Thompson is about to address her team after a whole lot of hard work and preparation.
Record that is actually recorded in slightly that's actually recorded for us here in 60 frames a second. So I don't know if our thing will allow us to do that yet, but
in the room. Can you guys hear me? No. Can hear me, but the room can't. You can hear me? Because the guys.
Eu dormi no Falcon Heavy, agora fui recompensado depois de vir 3 vezes aqui, né? Recompensado.
I don't know what he's telling me to do.
Valeu a pena.
O pessoal tá comentando aqui, vocês deram spoiler do lançamento pra gente.
Foi. Mas é um spoiler do bem, vai, um spoiler do bem.
É verdade, porque se tivesse explodido, a gente ia mostrar antes, né?
Ia mostrar antes. E ainda ia vender as imagens pra Globo.
Tá certo.
This is your first launch?
It's my first launch. Yeah, 20 years of it.
E aí, Sérgio, quais os próximos passos que vai acontecer aí?
Estamos aqui, estamos esperando aí, já separou o core stage.
Here, this is a replay. Check it out. You can see the
Well, for once, I might be speechless. So you guys know I have talked a lot about appreciating the moment that you're in, and we have worked hard as a team. You guys have worked hard as a team for this moment. This is your moment. It is not by chance that you are here today. So I want you to look around at this team and know that you have earned it. You have earned your place in the room. You have earned this moment. You have earned your place in history. You were part of a first. Doesn't come along very often. Once in a career, maybe. But we are all part of something incredibly special, the first launch of Artemis. The first step in returning our country to the moon and on to Mars. What you have done today will inspire generations to come. So thank you. Thank you for your resilience. You know, I said at the pre-test briefing, the harder the climb, the better the view. We showed the Space Coast tonight. What a beautiful view it is. So congratulations. So we got a couple of traditions here in launch control. And the first one is when you're in the position for the first time, you get a tie cutting. And so I have my launch director scissors, and I'm going to get my tie cut by a couple of legends that are here. And then anyone who wants their tie cut will be making the rounds in the firing room. You got your console chiefs, if they want to do it, that's fine. If you want me to do it, you might have to wait a little while, but I'll stay all night if I have to. It'll be my pleasure to cut ties. So I'm going to take care of mine, and then I have one other presentation that I want to make this evening.
This is Charlie Blackwell Thompson, Artemis 1 launch director. She just got her tie cut. That is a tradition here at NASA. We just got to hear her talk to the team, and one thing that really stuck out to me that she said is that they've really earned their place in history. We're coming up on solar array deploy. Let's go on to Leah.
Thanks, Megan. And yes, we're here in Mission Control Houston, still monitoring the Artemis 1 mission and the first flight of Orion atop the Space Launch System. So far, we saw successful liftoff at 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time, all the way through separation from the core stage. We now have Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage flying free. And we've just heard that we have initiated solar array deploy. So we are turning our focus to that. The spacecraft was running on battery power, but stretching these wings will allow it to stop relying on those batteries and significantly extend the time it can stay in space. So solar array deploy takes about 12 minutes. We have 4 solar arrays that we need to deploy and latch. These will provide power to the spacecraft on its journey to distant retrograde orbit and all the way back to Earth. Once these are properly configured, again, Orion will no longer need to rely solely on battery power. And we expect this to be done about 30 minutes after liftoff. Right now, we're 19 minutes since liftoff today. Orion is now traveling 17,175 miles per hour. We're continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control Houston from the flight controllers monitoring the mission. A little bit about these solar arrays as we wait. Again, we heard the call that the deploy has been initiated. We'll hear a little bit more about that once they start to unfold. These 4 solar arrays generate 11 kilowatts of power, which is enough electricity to power 2 3-bedroom houses, and they have a wingspan of 63 feet. Just one of these 6.5 by 6.5 foot panels has 1,250 solar cells. So you're looking at a total of 15,000 solar cells. Now, we just heard the call that all 4 solar arrays have been released. So we initially heard the initiation call. That command had been sent. Now those 4 solar arrays are released. Again, this is about a 12-minute process. These solar arrays will deploy straight, and you're getting a live view right now. This is really exciting. They'll eventually be swept back against the vehicle prior to translunar injection burn to prevent any loads from breaking or damaging the arrays. And on the end of each solar array is a camera that will capture imagery for us throughout the mission, along with a few other cameras placed outside and inside the spacecraft to help us monitor and perform various other inspections. Of course, if you recall the Apollo capsule design, there were no solar arrays. We had fuel cells instead. So this design with arrays gives us the opportunity to stay in orbit longer since we practically have no limit to the energy available for use from the sun. Coming up on 21 minutes since liftoff. Orion is attached to the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. You can see those 4 solar arrays unfolding now. And again, Artemis 1 is a flight test. It's paving the way for a sustainable presence at the moon. Looking forward to the future, Gateway will be our space station in lunar orbit. And we have some similarities and differences in the solar arrays unfolding right now on Orion and those that'll be on Gateway. So like we're seeing now, these are deploying autonomously. The Gateway solar arrays will as well. And while these generate those 11 kilowatts of power, the 2 rollout solar arrays, or ROSAs, on Gateway will generate 60 kilowatts of power. That ROSA design is currently being tested aboard the space station. We have 2 new ones installed and a spacewalk conducted earlier today, preparing for another set. Coming up on 22 minutes since liftoff today, Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage traveling over 16,800 miles per hour. The solar arrays deploying now are part of the European service module. It's comprised of 20,000 parts and components. The service module was developed as part of an agreement between NASA and the European Space Agency, or ESA. This is the first time NASA is using a European-built system as a critical element to power an American spacecraft. Coming up now, in 24 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, spacecraft now traveling at 16,500 miles per hour around the Earth. We are in solar array deploy, and we have confirmation all 4 arrays are deployed. Coming up in a little less than 30 minutes is the perigee raise maneuver. And with our launch at 1:41 Eastern Time this morning, we are looking for a perigee raise maneuver about 53 minutes into today's flight. Again, we are now 25 minutes and 47 seconds into the flight, and we have a complete deployment of all 4 solar arrays. Orion's journey to the moon continues as planned. Again, looking forward to that perigee raise maneuver. That'll be coming up again at about 53 minutes into the mission, so about 27 minutes from now. During the perigee raise maneuver, the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will use its RL-10 engine to lift the lowest point of Orion in Earth's orbit. The current orbit is more of an oval shape than a perfect circle, and this burn will raise that point closest to Earth and make the orbit more circular. This will also include a checkout of Orion's systems and any adjustments to the solar arrays. It'll be a short burn, less than 30 seconds long, but critical to keep us on track, and it also prepares us for the next engine burn to send Orion to the moon. That's the translunar injection burn. That'll come up a little later, which is a longer burn, another firing of the RL-10 engine on the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. We caught a glimpse there of those solar arrays, and with all 4 solar arrays properly deployed, Orion's journey to the moon continues, and we've got more operational updates coming up shortly, but for now, I'm going to toss it back to Megan and Kayla at Kennedy.
Leah, thank you so much. Our return to the moon will be different than the last time. We plan to explore more of the lunar surface and learn how to live and work there. With more on our destination, let's bring back NASA's Dan Hewitt with our new moon board.
Hey, thanks, Megan. I gotta be honest, we ran outside to catch it. I'm still shaking a little bit. That never gets old. That is always one of the coolest things you'll ever see in your entire life. And that rocket was massive and loud and just so cool. All right, the moon. This is why we call it the moon board, but the moon, you know, since the dawn of time, humans have looked at the sky and shouted at our neighbor, "I'm gonna walk in your face." And in the 60s, we actually did it. 6 times, starting with Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Apollo 11, 1969, followed by 5 more successive landings, each time delivering 2 human beings to the surface of the moon. Our last one was Apollo 17, and that was in 1972, Gene Cernan and Harrison Smith stepping off for the last time. Now, we have not sent humans back since then, but they accomplished a lot under Apollo. Lots of technological advancements, deployed science instruments, brought back hundreds of pounds of lunar rocks and regolith, teaching us about the moon and also about our place in the solar system. The moon is fascinating because it doesn't have a lot of the geological processes we have here on Earth. You don't have erosion, you don't have wind and water wearing down rocks, you don't have plate tectonics that are constantly recycling the crust, and so everything out there is really old. In fact, one of the rocks brought back on Apollo 15, called the Genesis rock, was dated to be 4 billion years old, so from the primordial beginnings of our solar system. But as Kayla said a little bit earlier, those missions were measured in days, their spacewalks in just hours. With Artemis, we're looking to go and we're looking to stay. And we're not looking around the equator like under Apollo, we're looking at the lunar South Pole. Now, why? So we haven't sent people since the 70s to the moon, but we haven't stopped studying it. We've had orbiters like the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which has literally just been flying loops around the moon, taking high-resolution images of the surface, so high resolution that you can look them up. They have images of all the different Apollo landing sites, and you can actually see the footprints, the paths they left in the lunar regolith of those sites. We had a mission called L-Cross, which slammed a probe into a crater on the moon, sending out material, some of which potentially hadn't seen direct sunlight for billions of years, and then analyzing what shot out. And through missions like that and others, we've been able to find that there is water ice trapped in those permanently shadowed areas on the moon. A lot of them center around that South Pole. We have already identified 13 potential landing sites for the Artemis 3 mission. And these are where we're going to send our astronauts around the lunar South Pole to access that water ice. Now, Why water? Why are we caring about water? Well, it serves a lot of purposes. Obviously, for humans, you need that to breathe. You can split water apart, get oxygen for breathing gas for an atmosphere. If you have a lunar base, you can split it into oxygen and hydrogen. That's rocket fuel. We just launched the most powerful rocket in history using those constituent parts. And so you can start to live off the land. We can use that, something called in situ resource utilization. And really, the whole point of that is to use the moon as this proving ground. We're trying to get to Mars. We're trying to learn to live on other planets where there is gravity, where we're going to have to use resources there on the ground because we won't be able to bring everything with us. And by going to the lunar South Pole, by going to stay under Artemis, we're going to be able to start practicing that. We're going to perfect those systems, perfect those techniques and operations we need to do that so we can use the moon as that jumping off point to Mars and beyond. So that's why the moon. We're going to see Orion fly around it for the very first time in just a couple of days. That launch was spectacular. I'm still way too excited, but can't wait to see some shots of the moon from up close from Orion. So I'll send it back over to you, Megan.
Thanks so much, Dan. So right now we're actually joined by members of the Red Crew. You'll remember from watching the launch coverage that the Red Crew was sent out by the launch team when the launch team identified a small leak on a hydrogen valve inside of the mobile launcher. Well, now here they are. This is Trent Annis. Trent, can you just introduce everybody else here on your team?
Yeah, so this is Chad. He's our safety guy. And behind me is Billy. And he's the experienced hydrogen tech out here.
And the three of you guys really, I would say, saved the day today. I mean, really, you guys had to go in there to what's called the blast danger zone. You guys are specially trained to be able to do operations on the pad while cryo is loading. Talk to us about getting that call, being told, hey, you guys need to go in there. And it was the first time for all three of you.
Yeah, all I could say is we were very excited. I was ready to get up there and go.
Really? How are you guys feeling?
I was very comfortable, very confident in the test team and the procedures and our training. We did a great job.
Walk us. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
How gratifying it must be for you guys, because you train for this eventuality but don't always get to do it. Billy was saying that he's been a Red Crew team member for 37 years, and this is the first time he's been called to go into the blast danger zone. So I know for us, when we're training for all of these eventualities, whether it's a spacewalk or robotics operations, you really want to put that training into practice. How do you guys feel like it went today?
Amazing. I still can't believe it. It's surreal to me. It's just insane.
Yeah, kind of walk us through what you were thinking. So you get there and what, is it just like game time and you're really focused, or, you know, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'd say we were very focused on what was happening up there, just making sure we knew what was happening. Because the rocket's, you know, it's alive, it's creaking, it's making venting noises, it's pretty scary. So on zero deck, my heart was pumping. Mm-hmm. My nerves were going, but yeah, we showed up today. I think as soon as we walked up those stairs, we were ready to rock and roll.
And they were telling us a bit about it while you were working on it. You guys were actually just torquing down the valve to prevent or reduce the leak rate or stop the leak. Is that right?
That's right. Just the packing gland. It was a little loose, so went up there and tightened her up.
You're probably still like in this, oh my gosh moment, like all of us are. You know, has it actually hit you, like the role you played today in making Artemis 1 launch?
You know, I still can't believe it. Like, it's, like I said, it's surreal and just amazing. I don't know about you guys, but
they're nodding along behind you for sure. Anything you want to say to the launch team? Again, this is a big day for the launch team, for you guys, NASA, but really the whole world. I mean, this is a historic launch that I think we'll all remember. Really.
You know, we had a lot of people here helping us out, a lot of teams, firing room. I'm sure that was hectic. And, you know, NASA, Boeing, all the other companies did a great job, and we're glad to be part of it.
One thing I always like to say is spaceflight is a team sport, and I think you guys perfectly demonstrated that today, right? Like, none of us could accomplish this on our own. It takes a really complex team. Nobody can be an expert in all of the systems, all the technology, all the workarounds we might have to do to get a rocket off the pad. So thank you for the role you played in that team today. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you coming by to talk with us. All right, it's now been about 35 minutes since liftoff of Artemis 1. Orion and ICPS are now free flying, so let's head back to Leah again to talk about how the journey is going so far.
Thanks, Megan. And it has been a pretty smooth ride so far. And we are now, again, like you mentioned, coming up on 36 minutes since launch. That puts us about 17 minutes into the until the perigee raise maneuver. That's going to be the maneuver that lifts the lowest point of Orion's orbit around the Earth and puts us where we need to be ahead of the translunar injection burn. The translunar injection burn is that really long burn that we're going to need to send us on to the moon. So we've been treated to some exciting views from the spacecraft today, including, and we hope to see some from inside the cabin, but we expect to continue receiving photo updates throughout the mission. It takes a team, though, to bring the imagery of Orion down to Earth. So let's meet them.
The imagery that we're collecting on Artemis 1 and the mission itself is preparing to carry humans to the moon. The Orion Imager team is going to be monitoring every aspect of visual spacecraft performance for the entire duration of the mission. The first time that we're going to be live streaming digital video from its spacecraft back down to the Earth from the vicinity of the moon. That's never been done before. What we'll be transmitting live streaming will be lower resolution, more compressed, because we have to fit it into a thinner pipe, if you will. Every one of these cameras is in its position where it is and is configured the way it is for a very specific reason. We're going to be monitoring anything that we can see with the cameras for spacecraft performance. The imager teams at NASA are composed of dozens and dozens of very highly trained, very specialized people, engineers, technicians, analysts. If we can see it, we're going to try and keep an eye on it. Imagery has been invaluable throughout the history of NASA. We flew cameras on Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, all of that stuff that we saw while the astronauts were on the moon. It helps us detect the unknown unknowns. It allows us to see things that we didn't anticipate happening before. So when we do fly people on Artemis 2, we can have a high confidence that everything is working the way it should.